Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma221 here, back again today to talk about the final chapter of Oshi, chapter number 166. This chapter is titled Star. And really, I've talked about this a lot of times whenever I've talked about Oshi, but sometimes Oshi uses like the most stereotypical chapter titles that I think have been used multiple times before. Now, I didn't go and fact check about this chapter, like, all right, how many times does the word star come up in a chapter title? But I think it's at least got to be, I don't know, like 2 or at least 3, because there's a lot of references to stars in this series. And as we'll get to in this chapter, I think this chapter title really works for the final chapter of this glorious and amazing series. It's just so crazy to think that after this, Wednesdays won't have the same meaning anymore. I mean, it's so weird to think that, like, for the past, golly, almost 2 years, I think we're probably approaching, like, 18 months or so, if not closer to 20, I have sat down at my desk and talked about Oshi almost every Wednesday for the past, like, 18 months or so. And it's crazy to finally think that the series is coming to an end. I mean, I've come to terms with this already, and like before, like, all right, yeah, we know the series is ending in 5 chapters. We got that announcement. And even through reading all of these other chapters, like, all right, we've got 1 more chapter left, we got 2 more chapters left, 3 more chapters, yada, yada. The fact that this series has ended hasn't resonated with me really as much as it has today whenever I sat down and read this Oshi chapter, which really is a very interesting one for a few reasons, as we'll get into. I do think it's really good, but I also find it very interesting the way that Asakasa wrote this chapter to not be a time skip into the future, which I think does help with a lot of various things, and at the end of the day, does fix a lot of criticisms that I think a lot of fans have had with this series thus far. Now, I will say this, of course, this last chapter, number 166, is, I think, 25 pages long, maybe. Let me fact check that. Yeah, it's 25 pages long, which does mean that there's a good bit more amount of content than there is in a regular Oshi chapter. But fans, honestly, are not too happy with this chapter, it seems. I mean, before I sat down and recorded this chapter review today, I had time because my roommate was in the room and I don't like to bother him whenever I'm recording videos. And I was sitting here and I was just looking on like the Oshi Reddit, looking for the new volume cover that we'll talk about here in a minute. And all of this stuff going on, and a lot of fans think this is just a terrible ending. Like, a lot of people are calling it, like, an ending just as bad as JJK and Kaguya-sama. Like, I read JJK's ending. Yes, I didn't think it was the best ending of a manga of all time, but I thought it was fine. But, like, I really feel like this was the perfect ending to this manga from what it was trying to do from beginning to end. But to sort of get into a few of the other topics here, like I said, today is when the final chapter comes out, but of course in Japan, manga all gets put into volumes, and the final volume is coming out on December 18th or 19th, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's 19th in Japan, but technically it'll be the 18th by the time we're in the States because of how time zones work. And we actually have a color page at the beginning of this Oshi chapter, and this color page has I on the front of it, and it is the volume cover for volume 16 of the manga, which I think contains 13 chapters of the manga, I think all the way from like 154 all the way to 166, which is like, that's a good amount of chapters to include in a manga volume for sure. But before we get into talking about this Oshi chapter, first, as normal, and for the last time, let's talk about what happened last time in Oshi. Of course, we have been following the tale of Aqua, who is on the quest of revenge to get back for his mother's death, of course being Ai Hoshino, and it all came to a head whenever he finally met Hikaru Kamiki on that sort of cliff face, and Aqua sort of revealed his whole plan of like, hey, I'm going to stab myself, and both of us are going to fall into the water, so we will both end up dead and drowning and everything, but they will blame everything on you and not me. And we saw that plan worked very, very well, besides for Akane, who's able to sort of deduce everything and come through at the end of the day and say, hey, yes, we know this is not how this worked. We know that Aqua, you were too kind, and you wanted to live too much for that to happen. And last chapter was pretty much all of the characters coming to terms that Aqua had died. We had this really, really emotional moment with Kana where they were at the funeral of Aqua, and Kana just broke down because she was never able to tell the person she loved, the person who she cared for the most, that she loved them and wanted to spend the rest of their life together. And she wasn't able to do that because of Aqua's death, pretty much, right? And also going through and seeing all of the reactions of a lot of the other characters, pretty much how Gontonda took this, how a bunch of our other side characters took it. And eventually, at the end of the chapter, we went through and saw how Ruby internalized all of this. And we pretty much learned that Ruby had just not left her room much. I mean, she didn't even go to Aqua's funeral. And the end of the chapter is pretty much just like, hey, but humans are stronger than that, and we know that they will come out of this in some good way at the very end of the day, right? And this Oshinoko chapter, the last chapter, chapter number 166, titled Star, of course, like I mentioned a second ago, starts off with this beautiful color page of Ai on the cover of it, where she is doing her typical thing of like the hand over, or the two fingers over her eye, pretty much like doing that sort of whole motion, but this time her arm is sort of stuck straight up in the air. And yeah, one thing I've always mentioned through these Oshinoko chapter reviews is the way that the chapter title is normally portrayed in a star icon of some kind. Normally it's like a 5-point star, it's like either black or white, and inside is written like chapter, blah, 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 boom, right? But this chapter, I think, really takes that evolution to the final stage. As like I said, this is the last chapter, Star, and it is literally written last chapter Star, but instead of being the regular 5-point star, it is one of the 6-pointed stars, like the ones we see in all of the characters' eyes, whether it be the light Sharingan or the dark Sharingan, which is a really interesting sort of little note to see there, because I just really like it. Like, hey, this small thing that I've been paying attention to for all of these Oshinoko chapters, it's here. I mean, I've been covering this series now for what is pretty much 56 chapters, like just over a third of this entire series, and it's really fun to note that like this little thing I've noticed since the beginning has sort of changed up on this final chapter. A little bit of a fun note right there, right? But as we hop into this chapter of Oshinoko, this chapter is mainly just a bunch of narration from who I take it to be from Akane's point of view, as she has been the one who's been giving us most of the narration from these following chapters, and it only seems right that she would be the one giving us this narration in the very end of the series, right? But this narration just starts, in this world where all you can think about is dying, it is impossible to live without encountering sadness. The world is dark, and you have no hope for tomorrow, and also no dreams. As we see a bunch of very interesting panels here of the world pretty much being a very shitty and dark place. We see what seems to be a girl with a mask over her face, or like a surgical mask, not like an Oni mask or something. She is standing up on top of a bridge. It looks like this bridge, we see the last part of it is Gaoka, which I'm guessing is some like Japanese city or something. And presumably, like, yes, this girl may be trying to jump off the bridge and commit some very bad things to herself. We then see a newspaper where it's like, hey, this TV star Aqua has died, like encountering sadness. We then see some news stories saying like, hey, a suspect wanted for assault and robbery has been arrested in Hoshimine Prefecture. A mother and son, yada yada, has some suspicion going on between them. We see some person's desk at a school named Nampomo-chan, and we see that their desk is completely covered in scraps of food and a bunch of bad things. And then in the final one, and no dreams, we see some person in a wheelchair drifting through the streets of Tokyo. Sort of all of this is going to say like, hey, the world can be a very bad place at times, but as we'll get into, that's not the general message of this chapter, that the world is just completely shit, right? As we move on from this, Akane's narration just continues saying, hey, in this world filled with people like that, Ruby was crying the entire time. She cried more and more than anyone else. She cried and cried again. But still, she rose up. She clenched her teeth without being able to sort out her feelings, without anything to save her. And with all of the pain and sadness she was carrying, she began to run. As we see some visuals here of Ruby, how she's been doing with all of this. As we see, she's in her room, she's just crying a whole bunch. So of course, her brother, the other most important person to her in her life, her other person of true family, has died just like her mother did so long ago. And we see the posters of Ai that Ruby has up in her room are torn to pieces, which is something that we know Ruby would never want to do. We see her crunched over a toilet, presumably puking and just crying into the toilet. And we also see Miyako on Ruby's shoulder, just trying to console her this entire time. But eventually we see she just stands up, she clenches her fists, she clenches her teeth, and the dark starring god that we see that's in her eye suddenly fades to that light one once again. But the tears don't stop, because this is something that Ruby will never forget in her life, this emotional moment. But she begins to run to the future, because what is she going to do? Dwell on the past? Akane then continues the narration to saying, "And we chose to live." As we see a bunch of little snapshots of all of the various other important characters in Oshi no Ko. We see Akane standing out and looking into the world. We see that, we see Mimcho's YouTube channel, Mimcho's room, where there's a bunch of videos going on. We see that she's just got a few videos like, hey, some sad news. From Mimcho YouTube channel 100, I've got 1 million subscribers, right? This is like a video of like, hey, I did this. And then just an announcement on Mimcho's channel that, hey, I'm going to be taking a break for a while. Of course, because Aqua has died. But in this moment, we see Kana bust into the room where Mimcho is sitting. And she's crying too, but she comes over and picks Mimcho off the ground. And the two of them just give themselves a warming embrace because of all of this is going on. As we see Ruby at some point comes into this picture, and the three of them, the entire team of B Kamachi, all comes together and just hugs each other in the end for what has happened here, right? We get some more narration just saying, "We chose to search for the meaning of our lives, while occasionally remembering you who passed away. It's not easy, but we believe that if we do our best at what we can do, we will find a reason for living." As we see a bunch of other shots of all of the important characters of the series, sort of wrapping all of them up together. We see a quick little scene of Frill and Minami, of course, Ruby's two friends from school, who, of course, knew Aqua a little bit. We see the two of them are just sitting down eating lunch, and they both have these sour expressions on their face. And eventually they see somebody off in the distance who sort of looks like Aqua from what it seems like. We can't really tell much more than that, though. And we see the expressions on their faces suddenly changes a little bit, sort of giving a wrap-up to their characters. We then see my good old boy Melt Narushima, as we see that he is just jogging through a forest somewhere. Or probably more accurately, a park. We see that he's just jogging around. He's got all of his gym clothes on, like a towel around his neck. He's got one of those like arm bracelets on his arm, right? An arm bracelet on his arm. It's on his wrist. I don't know why I'm calling it an arm bracelet on his arm. But we see that he's running, and even while running, he's still crying because of everything that's happened here. As he just runs through, and he just keeps on running no matter what. We then see some more images of Mimcho, the whole B Kamachi team, Kana, Mimcho, and Ruby, all walking through a downtown area of some sort. As we see that Ruby is, of course, being photobombed because it's her brother, Aqua, who has recently died in this massive tragedy. And we see Kana in the background sort of holding all of these people away, while Mimcho's sort of like trying to pull her forward, like, all right, come on, Ruby, we gotta keep going over this way. As we see that Ruby has a very, like, solemn expression on her face, because, yeah, it's a very sad thing that's happened here. The next scene we see is, of course, Taiki Himakawa, where we see that he is at a graveyard, where he has gone to the Himakawa family grave, their tomb there, as he's sitting in front of it, flowers in his hands, and he's just looking at the headstone of course, the Himakawa family, the family that he no longer has because of Hikaru, and also the family that he's lost because of Aqua, somebody who was related to him at the very end of the day. It's just a little bit of an emotional moment just seeing this, like, damn, yeah, I can understand the feeling that Taiki is going through here. We then see some more images. We see Miyako, who, of course, is very sad about all of this still going on. And we even see Saito in the background, who's, of course, still helping Miyako out. And Miyako gets back into the groove of, like, yeah, one of my children may be dead, but hey, I've got a company to run, and I can still support one of these children right here, right now. As we see that she's getting back into her whole manager sort of facade and like passing out papers to everybody. We see some stuff with Mimcho and Ruby sort of putting up their hair, sort of symbolizing like, hey, we're moving on in life. We see some shots of Kana, who is still very sad while she's at an acting gig somewhere, thinking about Aqua and how his life affected hers. And eventually she falls to the ground, but she just has to get right back up and continue on doing what she does. We then see a little thing with with Akane, as we see that she is on some sort of show of some kind, some sort of prank show, it seems, as she's walking through somewhere, and there's this zombie guy who pops out all of a sudden with a knife lodged in his skull, and she sort of has a little bit of an interesting reaction, like, oh, what's this? And then pulls the knife out of the guy's head. It's a little bit of a weird scene, but it's like, that's pretty interesting. It's sort of some prank show of some kind, and she sort of gives her regrets to whatever the supervisor of this project is. And then we see a poster for Bikomachi auditions for those who aspire to be the #1 star in a legendary group, right? As we see this young girl looking at this Bikomachi flyer, because of course, Bikomachi has some spots to fill, and they're putting this out to the new generation to see this. We then see director Gontonda, as we see that he's, of course, at his office, sitting in front of his computer, writing a movie, doing whatever type of tasks he's doing. And we see behind him, we see a little desk with 2 objects on it. We see one of these is a trophy for Japan Academy, the Best Award, of course, for the 15-Year Lie movie that he succeeded in making and became such a star hit. But we see right beside of this monolith here, of this little statue, of this award, this trophy, that's the right word I'm looking for, we see a framed picture of Aqua right beside it. Because, of course, Aqua was the one who made that movie possible. And, of course, Gontonda was the one who was really the most like a father to Aqua in his life. So it's another little bit of like, hey, just look how all these characters are moving on and doing. As we eventually cut back into the narration from Akane, as it just goes, Ruby kept running, hiding her sadness within lies, forcing herself to smile, bringing out the darkness in her heart when it mattered most. She used everything she could to carry on with your dreams. The world interpreted her tragedy as a drama. They were fascinated by the story of Ruby Hoshino, which was full of reality. She became someone they couldn't take their eyes off of. And today, yes, today, is the day Ruby and Bikomachi will be performing at the Tokyo Dome. Surely this is a day that everyone, including you, were dreaming of. She's come this far while telling herself lies. Not about being sad. I think those lies have given something to someone living in the darkness. As we see a bunch of images here pretty much just going through, we see Ruby's face with a bunch of billboards and everybody just so attracted to this. People in their homes looking at their phone until eventually we see the Tokyo Dome. And most importantly, in the sky above the Tokyo Dome, we see a 6-pointed star shining very, very brightly in the night sky above the dome. As we see everybody just looking at this happening, we see Miyako and Saito, of course, standing in the sidelines, looking at this dream finally come true for them, that someday they were going to have Ai perform there. But then Ai's tragedy occurred, and now it's Ruby's turn. Ruby gets to fulfill the dream that they were all hoping she would at the end of the day. We see the fans are going wild, and we see in the audience, we see both Akane and Kana sitting next to each other, praising the performance that's going on here. We do see a few other girls doing the Bikomachi stuff, of course, because of course we see Ruby and Mimcho up there, but we also see just a few other characters who we don't necessarily know and don't particularly matter for the grand scheme of things. Most importantly, Ruby is fulfilling her dream, and Mimcho is standing right next to her during all of this, right? And as all of this happens, we see just Akane's smile, just very generous as all of this is going on. As we finally cut to a little girl who is sitting in the stands of this Bikomachi performance, as she's just sort of standing there very wide-eyed, just looking at this performance, as we suddenly get something that's not just narration in this chapter, as we see presumably Akane just saying, "Dear God, she must have been born to bring light into the darkness," as we get a close-up on this girl's face, whose eyes are shining bright with the light Sharingan, the eyes that convey love, as she's looking up to, of course, the performance going on in front of her. As the narration just continues, it's like the darker things get, the brighter Ruby shines, almost like stars in the night sky, as we now get a better look at all of the glow sticks that people are holding up for this Bikomachi performance. And instead of being your regular glow sticks, they're actually stars. They're little handles with some light up stars on the very end of them, really giving rise to this idea of a star shining deep in the night. As all of this is happening, we get this two-page spread of Ruby just standing up in front of the dome, in front of everybody, her finger pointing towards the sky. And at the tip of her finger, it's almost glowing like a star at the end of the day. As we see in the audience, everybody's yelling, they're cheering, they're screaming for Ruby and Bikomachi, as they're all holding up these little glow sticks, and it looks like this stadium is just filled with stars. We get a great image of Ruby's face in this moment, as the two eyes that convey love, the light Sharingans, are just so awake in her eyes. And we see Kana, we see Akane, we see Mimcho, we see Saito, and we see Miyako, all so happy and so grateful for what's going on here. This experience that they get to experience now because of what Ruby has done with her life in this amazing moment of just seeing the stars in the stadium. As we then look right above the stadium, to where there's now a second star, one of these six-pointed stars shining bright in the night sky, presumably both Aqua and I looking down on Ruby's performance in this moment. At this point, we cut over to not only the final scene of this chapter, but also the final scene of Oshinoko, as we open up to an apartment where we see the sun is shining bright one morning. We see an alarm clock next to a bed that says 5:31 a.m. and a phone alarm going off set for 5:30, which is the schedule rehearsal. As we see, Ruby has gotten out of bed, and she just stretches, goes up to her window and says, "Oh man, I'm working again today. I'll have to tell another lie. And no matter how hard things get, I have to smile and have fun on stage." But this is an incredibly fun job. As we see Ruby going through all of her daily traditions, pretty much, like, we see that she's got a bunch of, like, fan letters on her desk, and we see that she's got, like, an autographed book. She's putting up her hair, doing all of her various things, and eventually she gets all dressed and everything, and she walks over to a little bit of a table right in front of her door. As she looks at it, and she says, "Hey, watch me, you two. I'm going to the future that Mama and Aqua illuminated for me." As we see on this table is not only a calendar, but also a signature of Aqua's, a signature of Ai's, but also pictures of everybody who she loves and cares about. We see a picture of Ai, we see a picture, a young picture where, of course, it was Aqua and Ai both in the frame, and also just a little picture of Aqua, as we see also an Ai Hoshino plush sitting here too. As at this moment, Ruby just says, "Hey, I'm going to that future that Mama and Aqua illuminated for me, and I'm off now." As we see, she opens up the door of her apartment. She's got a suitcase in her hands. She's all bundled up for presumably some cold weather. As she walks out of her house, we see a few other things on a side table beside of her. But this moment, as Ruby leaves her house, that's when we get the message. Oshinoko. The end. And that is the end of not only this chapter, but of this series, man. It's really so crazy to think about how far this series has come from the beginning of, like, hey, this fun little quirky reincarnation story, to eventually, like, hey, here's where we are now. Ruby fulfilled Ai's dream at the end of the day and made it to the dome. It's such a nice moment at the end. And yeah, I think there are a few criticisms that I think are valid points that people bring up for this chapter, like, oh man, we wanted Aqua to reappear. But, like, at the end of the day, even if we had some more reincarnation plot, would have that really been the ending that you would have wanted? It's really just a nebulous thing, because it's like, as much as I was guessing that we were probably going to have an ending where Aqua was becoming back, at the same point, it's also very nice to see and realize that Asa Asakasa Mingo Yorki had this idea to have Aqua fulfill his goal in life, to reach the end. And that's how it goes. And this final chapter not being a time skip necessarily, it just being more of a continuation of, hey, this is how things go, this is how things are, and hey, we're going towards the future. Even if we have all had sadness and have all been broken on the inside, at the end of the day, we will come back from it. It's such a beautiful message for Oshinoko to have. Now, I've seen a lot of criticism that this is like a bad end of Oshinoko. A lot of people wanted Aqua to survive and Aqua to make it through, and like, I saw a lot of things like, hey, this is almost like the bad end of a visual novel almost, where everybody's just sad and broken on the inside, but I don't view it necessarily that way. I just view it as this is the ending that they've gone for, as, hey, this is how life works. Sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's depressing, but at the end of the day, we all realize who we were meant to be, and we'll make it there. And I think that's just a really nice message at the end of the day. I don't know, I really love seeing all of the characters and sort of how they are doing in this moment. Really, these pages where we see just like Mimcho, she's very sad because like, hey, her friend's dead, and Kana coming to pick her up, Frill and Minami. Most importantly, we see Melt just like running through the woods, which is like, Melt, you were my favorite character in this series. I wish you could have done more, and I wish we could have seen more of you, but like, I still love you so much to the point that I think here at a upcoming Comic-Con I go to in January, I actually think me and my friend are going to be cosplaying both Aqua and Melt, which will be pretty fun if we actually do that. Of course, I'll be Melt because, like, I identify with Melt. I think Melt's really fucking cool, if you know what I'm saying. And also just sort of seeing Taiki Himakawa here at his Himakawa family grave, seeing Gontonda, which it really hit me on a reread of this chapter looking through, because I've read this chapter probably like 6 times in the few hours since it's been out, because like, this is an important chapter for me to read and go through, because like, this is the end of a series I've spent so much time covering. It's sort of a little bit of a big deal. But seeing, because this is a detail I missed on the first time, was not only the trophy from the 15-year line movie that he got, but also the picture frame of Aqua right beside it. It's such a small and emotional moment. It's just so nice. And I don't really understand the whole pranked thing with Akane. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but oh well, we get to see a little bit of Akane, which is never a problem. Until eventually this final moment where it's like, hey, this is a Tokyo Dome. We see that Ruby has realized Ai's dream in such a beautiful way at the end of the day, and the 2 stars shining bright above the dome, it's so incredibly nice to see. And I love how we just see everybody here. We see Kano, we see Akane, we see Miyako, and we see Ruby being a guiding light for everybody at the end of the day. She is using her eyes that convey love, to change the lives of some of these people, to affect it for the better. Which is such a nice and sweet sentiment at the end of the day, until eventually we get to this final scene where Ruby is just going to work in the morning, and before she leaves, she just thanks her mom and her brother for doing everything they have for her, even though they may not be here today to see Ruby fully realized. Ruby knows that the path she's going down is the one that they built and wanted for. It's such a beautiful moment at the end. And it's weird to think that after this, there's no more like, hey, so I wonder what's going to happen next time in Oshinoko. Because this is the end of the series, which is absolutely insane. It's weird to think that I was able to cover the series for so long, and I thank you guys all so very much for watching these Oshinoko chapter reviews, all the way from chapter number 111 through the 4 interlude chapters, all the way up to now, 166, or really 56 chapters later. It's just so nice that I was able to do this, and I just thank you guys so very much for watching my videos this entire time. Now, don't take it like I'm done making videos. I'm still going to make plenty of other videos, but this is just the end of Oshi no Ko. There's no more Wednesdays where I'm going to be sitting down either at my family's farm or in my college's library or anywhere else, or sitting down and just reading like, oh boy, new Oshi no Ko chapter came out. Okay, let's sit down and read it. Oh boy, I wonder when I get to make a video about that. There's no more rushing back to my dorm room to sit down and be like, guys, Aqua's looking like he's dead. This is just truly the end of an era, and it's, honestly, I'm a little sad to see it go, but at the same time, I'm glad that it is gone, because it means that future generations will later be able to come through and read like, hey, this was some good manga by Asakasa and Mingo Yoriki. I enjoyed this, and maybe don't enjoy it as much as we did in the moment reading it. I don't know. As far as what's next for Oshi no Ko, of course we have the final volume of the manga coming out. There are still probably 2 seasons of an anime to premiere, so like Oshi no Ko is not going anywhere anytime soon. But as far as the source material of the manga, it is over for now. It has been revealed that Asakasa will be coming back with a fantasy manga of some type in early 2025, and he's having another author with him for this endeavor. We don't know what's going to be happening to Mingo Yoriki, what series they are going to be working on next, but I'm sure whatever it is, it'll find a great success, being that, like, yes, Oshi no Ko found great success at the end of the day. But yeah, with that, I really don't have too much else to say about this chapter of Oshi no Ko. If anybody is still watching this and wants to hear my reviews on manga in the future, I kindly ask you guys go down to the description down below and recommend manga you guys would like me to see me cover on the channel. Because, of course, I have spent so long talking about Oshi no Ko, it has been like, yes, every Wednesday I try to get out the Oshi no Ko video when available. But for now, it's like, hey, I don't have anything going on for the next few Wednesdays, and even if I've got to, like, find, like, a Thursday series to start covering, I am going to be down in one slot of manga that I normally cover, so it would be nice to, like, find a series for that, but not that it really matters. This was a great chapter of Oshi no Ko, and what I believe to be a perfect send-off. Let me take it back. It's not a perfect send-off, but it is a pretty damn good send-off for this entire series. But with that, thank you guys all so very much for watching this video today on Oshi no Ko, the final chapter number 166, titled Star. Like I said, I do plenty of other anime and manga related content on the channel. All of that will be linked down in the description down below. Follow me on Twitter, join the Discord if you ever want to hear my ramblings about Twitter and Oshi no Ko. I put up a few tweets before this chapter came out, like, damn it, I don't know if I can wait too much longer before this peak fiction, like, arrives into our hands. But yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching this entire time through all of the Oshi no Ko videos, all of the ones that got like 500 views and all of the ones that got like 4 views. I'm talking to you, the video I titled The Calm Before the Storm, where we just saw Aqua and Ruby hanging out together. That video did like complete garbage, but then other ones have done extremely well. So yeah, yeah, I'm at a loss for words, guys. I feel like I'm just rambling at this point. So yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time for something in the future. It may be Oshi no Ko related, it may not be, but either way, I'll catch you guys then. This is going to be Glowplasma 231, signing out.